I will tell this story in the first person perspective to bring you closer to what happened, but it is not my own personal experience. It came from a random caller on the Ghost Radio, which is a Thai call-in show where people can share their stories about ghosts that they have witnessed or heard in their communities. So without further ado, let us get straight into the story. I grew up in a small Thai village where everyone kinda knew everyone and the oldest child was expected to look after the rest. My grandmother had 4 daughters, my mother, a younger sister, and the twins that we called them Dao and Manao. Dao was the oldest among them. She was steady and practical, and also is very protective over everyone. And when the girls went anywhere, adults trusted Dao to bring everyone home. Dao and her twins, Manao, were almost always together. They looked alike, but you could tell them apart from the way that they moved. Dao chose the route and set the pace, while Manao kept the group close and checked no one fell behind. If you saw one, the other was always nearby. That was normal for us. This was in the 1980s, when weekend fun meant temple fair, with food stalls, music, and an outdoor movie on a white screen tied between poles. For Western listeners, you can imagine a small town fair mixed with a church event, with bright bulbs and families sitting on mats and monks blessing people who stopped to donate. It felt safe because the whole village was there. When the fair was announced, the girls asked Grandma for permission. She agreed on one condition. Dao was in charge. She had done it before. Pick a meeting spot, notice the path to the bathrooms, and keep an eye on the girls all the time. The plan was simple. They go to the temple fair, watch the movie, buy some snacks, and head home together after the movie finished. Nothing about that night looked unusual at first. The crowd was cheerful and the screen flickered to life, and the twins settled on a good spot. Everyone believed that Dao would always do what she would always did, and that is to make sure that all of the girls came back safely. They make their way to the temple fair and reached the temple grounds at sunset. The yard was crowded and food carts lined the path. The ticket table sat near the entrance and a large white screen stood at the far end. Music from the temple fair was mixed with the voices of the families finding places to sit. It felt like a normal village night in the 1980s in rural Thailand. The twins and their 2 younger sisters joined in the line ticket. Dao watched the line and counted the money, while Manao, she kept her eyes on the youngest, make sure that she was close and talked softly to calm her down. The line moved slowly because people wanted good seats before the movie began. At the table, Dao paid for 4 tickets. The seller knew their family name and wished them a good evening. The girls stepped away from the line and walked towards the open space in front of the screen. While they are on their way there, a group of young men drifted near them. Their clothes were clean and neat. People in the village said that these men came from wealthy families. One of them actually stared at Dao, the eldest twins, and told her to come with them to have a good time. His friend laughed and stood in the path, blocking them from making their way to the movie. Dao was irritated. She answered in a clear voice. She said no. She said they were here to watch the movie, and the young man leaned in closer as if he planned to argue. The others waited, waiting for Dao to show her expression on her face. The crowd around them kept moving. Most people didn't notice the moment. Families were still sitting on mats and the sound of the fair covered the tension. Dao shifted slightly so the youngest sister stood behind her. She repeated that they were not interested. Her tone stayed firm. After a pause, one man clicked his tongue and stepped aside. The group let the girls pass and their eyes followed Dao as the sister moves on. The twins led their sister to a clear patch of ground and sat down. The first preview lit the screen and the fair still looked bright and safe, but the mood had changed. The young men were still somewhere in the crowd, and Dao could feel it. She could feel that they were watching her. Dao and Manao led their two younger sisters to the open space in front of the screen. They spread a small mat and sat close together. The previews began, and the light from the projector washed over the crowd and made the night feel calmer. People settled in, and children quieted down. It felt like a normal outdoor cinema in a Thai temple fair, where families sit on the ground and share snacks while the film plays. Dao kept her eyes on the sisters, and also the path that leads to the bathroom and the food stalls. Manao checked the youngest sister, make sure that she was comfortable, and passed her a drink. After a few minutes, the twins spoke softly to each other. They agreed to stay seated until the first part of the movie finished. A little later, Dao leaned toward Manao and spoke in a low voice. She said she would go to the bathroom and came right back. She told Manao to stay with the younger sisters and not to move from the mat. Manao nodded and agreed. Dao stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked towards the shadow path behind the food stalls. The movie kept playing and the crowd focused on the screen. Manao watched the film, but also kept checking the path where Dao has gone. A few minutes later, then a few minutes passed, and then a few more. The younger sister asked if Dao was coming back soon. Manao told them to wait and keep watching. But as time stretched, the story on the screen moved forward, and the sister tried to stay calm. Manao looked again towards the stalls. She did not see her sister coming back. And when the scene changed and the music swelled, Manao made a small decision. She told the younger sister to sit still on the mat and not to leave. She said she would look toward the edge of the crowd to see if Dao was on her way back. Manao stood, scanned the faces nearby, and looked down the bathroom path. There was no sign of Dao. She returned to the mat and sat with the younger sister again. The film continued, but the girls were no longer following the story. They were watching the paths instead of the screen because they were waiting for her sister, Dao, to come back. The movie reached a quiet part and the crowd relaxed. Manao waited a little longer, but Dao still did not return. She turned to the younger sisters and spoke in a calm voice. She told them to stand up and hold hands. They folded the mat and kept it under one arm so that they would not lose it in the crowd. Manao led the two girls towards the bathroom path. She walked slowly and looked carefully at every faces that came toward them. She checked the line at the toilets, she checked the sinks and the area behind the stalls. Dao was not there. Manao asked a woman who was washing her hands if she had seen an older girl in a simple skirt and blouse. The woman shook her head and said she had not. They moved to the food stalls next. Manao asked two vendors who were cleaning their grills if they had seen Dao. One vendor thought for a moment and said he had seen someone who looked like her pass by earlier, but he was not sure. The other vendor said he had been busy with customers and had not noticed. The answers did not help, so Manao expressed her gratitude towards them and then walked on. The twins had friends at the fair. A small group of local Muay Thai boys stood near the edge of the yard and watched the crowd. Manao approached them and asked if they had seen Dao since the movie started. The boys looked around and asked when Dao had left. Manao told them that the time was best as she could, and one of the boys nodded and said they would help search right away. Manao decided to brought the younger sister back to the open space near the screen. She told them to wait where there was light and to stay together. She promised that she would not go far, and then she circled the yard again and again with one of the boys. They checked the same booths and the same side path and the area near the trees. They called for Dao in normal voices so they would not cause a panic. No one answered their call. The movie ended eventually and people stood up and started to leave. The yard became noisy and also loose, and the path filled with movement. Manao felt the pressure of time. She went back to the younger sisters and held their hands. She told them that they were going to find help from the adults. The three of them walked towards the temple buildings at the back of the grounds, where elders often gathered when the temple fair was closing. Manao spoke to an older woman she knew from the village and explained that her sister had gone to the bathroom and had not returned. The woman's face changed. She told Manao to wait there with the younger sisters while she called for more people. In a few minutes, 3 men from the village and 2 of the Muay Thai boys joined them. They asked short, simple questions and listened to Manao's answer. Then they split into small groups and spread out across the temple grounds. That night, it was no longer just felt like a temple fair. It felt like a search. Families stepped aside to let the groups pass, and some people started asking what was wrong. The story moved from one person to another in low voices, and Manao, she kept her younger sister close. She watched the path and also the dark spaces between the buildings. She kept expecting to see her sister walk back toward them with an apology and a tired smile. As the last visitor left the temple ground, the temple grew quieter. Lights from the main hall stayed on, and the side paths were dim. Manao stood with the 2 younger sisters near the back building, unsure of the next step. At that moment, an elderly monk came out from his small wooden house, which people in Thailand call it a kuti. He had likely heard the rumors and also the whisperings traveling across the yard. The monk walked toward them and asked what had happened. Manao explained that her sister, Dao, had gone to the bathroom during the movie and had not returned. She gave the time as clearly as she could, with the monk listening to her without interrupting. He did not make guesses. He kept his voice steady and told Manao that he would ask everyone still on grounds to help. He moved with purpose. He spoke to the temple helpers who were putting away chairs. He called to a few men who were closing the donation booth, and in a few minutes, even more small groups began to search the edges of the compound, the path behind the prayer hall, and also the open area beyond the trees. For Western listeners, it may help to know that in many Thai villages, monks are trusted community figures. When they ask for help, everyone just stop what they are doing and respond. The monk returned to the sisters and he looked at the youngest, who was shaking from tiredness and fear. He told Manao that the search would continue through the night and the girls should not wander in the dark. He offered to walk them home and speak to their mother himself. His tone was firm and kind. It felt like an adult taking full responsibility. On the way out, the monk spoke briefly with the Muay Thai boys and the village men. He pointed towards the side gate and told one group to cover the canal path. He told another group to follow the outer fence to the old fig tree and back. He did not raise his voice. He simply assigned routes and people just moved with his command. The monk then led the sisters along the main lane. The fair sounds were gone now, and the only sound left was the low hum from a few stalls remain. The girl stayed close to the monk, and Manao kept looking over her shoulder, hoping to see Dao hurrying up to them and catch up. However, the road behind them remained empty. When they reached the family house, the monk asked Manao to wait with the younger sisters at the gate. He stepped inside first and called gently for their mother. He did not rush his words. He explained the situation in a clear order. When Dao was last seen, who was already searching, and what area would be checked next. He promised to return to the temple and continue coordinating. Before he left, the monk told the mother that the temple bells would not ring that night. He said the sound might frighten the children. Instead, he would send the word through neighbors if they had found anything. The mother nodded, and she was pale and silent, but she listened to every word that the monk said. The monk turned toward the temple, and the sisters watched him go. Manao felt a small relief that the adults were now leading the effort. It did not stop the worry though, but it gave the night a path to follow. Now, the first night moved slowly. The Muay Thai boys and a few village men kept searching around the temple yard and the nearby paths. They checked the bathroom area again, the side lanes, and the open ground near the trees. They called for Dao's name and listened, but there was no answer. There was no response. At home, the mother waited at the doorway, and Manao sat with the 2 younger sisters and tried to keep them calm. The neighbors stopped by with water and short updates. No one had seen Dao, and the house was quiet except for the dogs outside and the clock in the main room. Near dawn, the searchers returned to say that they had found nothing. the mother decided to file a missing person report when the station of the police opened. Manao helped write down the details so they would not forget anything. In the morning, the mother and Manao went to the district police. The officer took notes and asked for the description. She said they would speak with vendors and people who were at the fair. She told the family to leave a phone number and to inform relatives in nearby villages. The search continues for 3 full days, and after a full week that passed with no signs of Dao, the village had already searched the obvious places during the day. The police spoke with vendors and a few riders who passed the temple at night as well. By the end of the week, an officer suggested that Dao might have run away, but the family did not believe it. Dao was the one who brought people home, not the one who disappeared from her home. However, that night, something new began. Around midnight, in the village, dogs across the village started to bark at the same time. Windows were closed and light went off. Then, people suddenly hear a woman crying in the lane. The sound moved past one house and then another, as if someone was walking and sobbing in the dark. No one opened their door, and everyone sort of just listened and waited for the crying to fade. The next night, the crying returned at almost the same time. It moved down the lane in a steady pace and from houses to houses as if the person knew the path by memory. The voice was clearer than before. It was a woman's voice crying and saying, "Mom, I'm sorry," over and over again, like an apology that could not end. People stayed inside and listened. Some parents covered their children's ear. Others stood behind curtains and watched the empty road. The voice did not shout. It sounded tired and raw, like someone had been crying and crying for many hours. The dog that had been barking fell quiet as the voice passed, and then started again when it moved further away. At Dao's house, the mother stood by the doorway and held the frame with both hands. Manao kept the younger sisters on the mat in the main room. No one spoke. They all heard the same words coming closer, and then paused near their gate and then continued towards the next house. When the sound faded near the edge of the village, the mother finally sat down. In the morning, people compared what they heard. Neighbors on 3 different lanes agreed on the phrase and the time. A man who lived near the fake old tree said he heard footsteps on the dry leaves and then the words and the voice crossing the small bridge, still saying the same apology word. An elderly woman said a short prayer and then asked others to do the same. The police were informed again that there was little to record beyond the hours and the sentence. An officer suggested that someone might be playing a trick, and yet no one had seen a person on the road and no one came forward. That evening, families shut their doors earlier. Lamps were turned low, and the village waited for midnight because everyone now expected the voice to return. On the 3rd night, the village grew quiet before midnight. People were already in their houses and they waited without speaking. When the hour came, the crying started again on the far lane and then moved forward at the same slow pace. This time, there was a new sound. It was a hard scrap that rose and fell on the dirt road, like something heavy was being pulled from behind. The sound of the crying and the scrapping stayed together. They passed one house and then the next and then the next with the same tired rhythm. It feels as if someone is crying and trying to drag a very heavy sack on the dirt across the village. Families did not open their doors, and some elders whispered in short prayers. Everyone stayed indoors and let the sound pass because they believe that the roads belongs to whoever is walking it right now. At Dao's house, the mother stood by the doorway again. The younger sisters sat on the floor with their hands on their knees. Manao listened carefully and counted the seconds between each scrap. The sound stopped at their gate for a brief moment, as if someone adjusted their grip and then it moved on. A few people peeked through the curtains, and they said they saw an empty road and a moving shadow on the ground. Others, they said they heard sounds and saw nothing. No one called out and no one asked who was there. In the morning, neighbors spoke carefully. They agreed on the order of the sounds and the way that they paused at certain gates. Someone suggested leaving a light on by the road after dark. Others nodded and said yes. That evening, before the sun went down, several houses placed small lamps by their front steps and then closed their doors. They were ready for the fourth night. So when the fourth night came, the family's uncle returned from the city. He had taken a late train, which is common in Thailand because night trains are far cheaper and arrived near dawn. The rural station was quiet and only a few riders got off. He began the long walk to the village with a small bag on his shoulder. As he reached the first house, he heard it, the sound, the crying that moved along the lane in front of him. The words were the same as the neighbor had reported. A woman's voice who was crying and saying, "Mom, I'm sorry," again and again. A heavy scraping sound followed each sentence as if something was being pulled over the dirt. He slowed his steps and the road was nearly empty. A few small lamps burned at doorways because families had started leaving the lights on. The sound came closer, steady and tired. He could tell it was moving in the same direction he was walking. Near his sister's gate, he saw a woman ahead of him in the weak light. She wore a white dress that was torn at the lower half. Her hair was loose and covered most of her face. Her legs seemed hurt and she walked as if each step cost an effort. Beside her was a large sack. She dragged it across the road and the cloth scraped on the ground in harsh rhythm. Dark stains ran down her legs and marked the dirt behind her. She looked like she was bleeding and also she was hurting when she was walking and crying. He felt a pull to help. He opened his mouth to ask if she was hurt or needed water or just needed help. At that exact moment, his sister called his name from the doorway of the house. He turned his head towards the voice, and it only took a few seconds, and when he looked back at the lane, the woman was gone. The crying had stopped as well, and the road was empty, except for the faint line where something heavy had passed. He stood still and listened. He was confused. There was nothing, no more sound to be heard. He walked towards the house and stepped inside, and his sister and the niece were awake and waiting. He told them what he had seen and where it had happened. The mother nodded with a tight face. She said the sounds had came every night and since the end of the first week. The uncle put down his bag and he said he would join the search for his niece at first light. For now, the family sat together in a small circle and waited for the morning. By the morning, the uncle kept his promise and joined the search. He went with 2 village men to speak with the vendors who had been packing when Dao disappeared again. Most had seen nothing useful. A few remember loud young men near the stalls, but they could not say where those men went after the movie began. Before noon, new talk spread across the lane and the village. 2 families said that their sons had not come home for several nights. Another house said that a young man had left on his motorbike and had not returned. No one wanted to connect these reports to Dao, but the timing was hard to ignore. People stopped talking and speaking in normal voices. They lowered their tone and watched the road. The mother and Manao returned to the police station with these updates. The officer took their reports, listened, and called for a second officer to the desk. They wrote down the names of the missing men and the last places that they were seen. The officer said that they would increase the search area beyond the temple grounds. They would ask nearby checkpoints to note unfamiliar riders after dark. Small groups were formed again at that evening. Some checked the canal path all the way to the irrigation gate. Others walked back the track behind the school towards the old sand pit. The uncle took the road past the fig tree and along the far fence line, where grass grew high. They moved slowly and kept to the clear ground. No one wanted to disturb anything a second time by accident. At home, the mother stayed at the doorway. She spoke with neighbors who brought short news. Manal kept the younger sisters inside and made simple food. The house was quiet, but it did not feel empty. People came and went with brief updates, and each time someone left, the mother looked at the lane again. By evening, the sun dropped and the air cooled. The uncle returned and shook his head. There was still no sign of Dao, and there was still no sign of the answer of the missing men. The families understood what this meant. The search would go on and the night sounds would return. They closed the door gently and waited for darkness to come. Over the next few nights, the pattern held. The crying began closer to midnight and the scrapping followed it like a shadow. The sounds moved at a small, slow pace along the lanes and past the gates. Families no longer asked if it would happen. They were prepared for it. People left small lamps by their steps. Some set a bowl of water by the road in case someone truly needed a drink. Curtains stayed closed and doors stayed locked. The village spoke less in the daytime because everyone was saving their strength for the night. At Dao's house, the mother noticed a rhythm. The crying paused for a heartbeat longer at their gate than the others. Manao marked the time quietly and the younger sisters stayed still on the mat and counted in their heads. No one called out. No one tried to follow the sound. The police drew through once after dark and circled the main lane with their lights on. By the time they passed the last house, the crying had already moved on. They noted the hour, but there was nothing to record beyond that. On the sixth night, the village felt even tighter. With lamps were lit earlier and dogs barked once and then settled. The crying stayed steady from the far lane to the bridge. It paused at a few gates, including Dao's gates, and then faded towards the fields. People listened until the silence returned. By morning, the talk was brief. Everyone agreed that the path was the same and the hour was the same as well. The uncle said that the pattern felt like it was leading somewhere. No one argued. That evening, families finished their chores early and waited for the next night to bring. The seventh night came and the village was quiet. Before the clock reached midnight, of course. Lamps were already lit along the lanes and families sat inside and waited without speaking. They knew the pattern by now. The crying began at the far end, just as before. It moved steadily from houses to houses, and the scraping sound of the sack on the floor followed it, heavy and slow on the dirt. People listened to the rhythm and counted the gates in their heads. When the sound reached Dao's house, they just stopped. The pause was longer than the other night, and the mother stood at the doorway with her hands on the frame. Manao and the other younger sister sat on the floor and did not move. The voice spoke clearly. It said, "This is the last night. I am so sorry." The words were calm and final, like a message that had been taken many nights to deliver. After that, the lane went silent. There was no crying or scrambling. Even the dogs stayed quiet for a long minute. Then, normal night sound returned, and small and distant, as if the village has been holding its breath and finally could exhale. At dawn, a scream came from the district police station. A vendor who set up a morning cart had seen a large sack on the front steps. It was tied with a rough cord. A dark liquid had seeped through the cloth. Seemingly looks like blood. Officer came out quickly and they covered their noses and moved the cart away. One officer called for a witness to stand by. Another wrote the time and the position of the sack on the floor. They spoke in short, careful sentences, the way that people do when they do not want to make any mistake. The sack was heavy, to say the least. Two officers lifted it onto the canvas sheet. They untied the cord and opened the mouth. Inside were human remains that had been cut into pieces, into parts. They also asked the vendor not to speak to others until the statements were taken. Word traveled fast anyway. By mid-morning, Families with missing sons came into the station. The officers set them in a shaded area and told them to wait. They explained that the identification had to follow a clear process. The station yard stayed quiet, and the silence felt heavy, as if every person knew what was coming even before the names were spoken. The uncle arrived and stood beside the mother at the police station. Manao kept the younger sisters at home, and the officers told the family that formal identification would begin soon. No one cried at first. They just stood in the heat and looked at the closed door, knowing that the night sound had led to this morning. By late morning, the identification process began. Officers brought family members in one by one. They spoke gently and explained what they would be seeing, and the medical team supervised. Forms were signed, and the station kept the yard as quiet as possible. The first name matched a young man from the group that had bothered Dao at the fair in the beginning of the story. A second name followed, and then a third. Each time, a mother or a father had to sit down. Neighbors stood by and offered water. No one raised a voice. In small towns like these, grief moves in a straight line from one house to the next. A fourth identification suddenly stopped everyone. The remains inside the sack matched the elder monk who had stepped out of his kuti, or the residency in the temple, on the night that Dao went missing. The same person who walked the siblings back home. Monks in Thailand are usually treated with strong respect, so everyone, when they hear that a monk was among the dead, felt like the ground had shifted under the whole village. Everyone was so astonished, surprised. An officer read the list back to confirm. 3 were the young men seen near the stalls that night, the same group that had tried to take Dao away from her sibling at the temple fair. The 4th was the elder monk from the temple. The room suddenly stayed still after reading the name, and people did not know where to put their eyes on or what to think. Outside, the mother stood with the uncle, and she did not speak. Manao, who is the twin sister, kept the younger sisters at home and waited for news. When the officer finally came out, he said the investigation would move to the temple buildings next. He kept his words simple. The families nodded, and the next step was clear. That afternoon, officers moved to the temple. They sealed a small wooden house where the elder monk had lived. It was the same kuti, or the residency house, that he had stepped out on the night that Dao went missing, and it was the same monk whose name appeared in the list at the station, which is among the corpse. A senior monk stood by to witness the search. A police photographer took pictures of the doorway, the window, and the lock. An evidence team opened the door and went through the rooms in slow steps. There was a low bed, a cabinet and a prayer mat, and a narrow storage space at the back with a door latched from the outside. They unlatched the door and opened it, and there she was, Dao's body. They found Dao in the end. The team stopped and called the medical staff forward. Notes were taken, and in clear order. The report would say that she had been beaten and assaulted sexually. There were signs that it was done repeatedly for multiple days because of the injuries that they found on her body. There were marks on her wrist and her ankles, and sign that she had been held there for about 7 days and 7 nights. Each item in the room was tagged and listed. Dao had this frightened and scared expression on her face. Even when she was dead, her body continued to have the same expression, as if she was crying and also in pain, and also was sexually harassed and assaulted almost every day. So when everyone found out the body, everyone was surprised. And of course, outside, the senior monk kept his hands together and stayed silent. Words has reached the families waiting near the gate, and the uncle lowered his head. The mother held the post and did not speak. Everyone understood what this meant. The monk who had walked the sisters home that night was among the dead, and Dao had been found inside his kuti. the same place that he had come from when they first spoke to him. News spread through the village before sunset, and people spoke softly at their gates and then went quiet. The temple grounds stayed closed, and also the police officers has to finish their work in the temple. A senior monk rang no bells that evening. The usual sound of prayer did not happen that night. At the family house, neighbors brought water and simple food and then stepped back. The mother sat near the doorway with the sad expression on her face. She had been crying for hours. Manao kept the younger sister in the main room, and the uncle handled short visits from officials who needed signatures and basic information. No one tried to explain the day. They only confirmed what had been found. By night, the lanes were nearly empty and the crying and the dragging did not return. The village felt as if it had finally understood the message from the past nights. Lamps stayed on at several doors, but no one waited at the windows. Inside the house, the mother closed her eyes and rested her head against the wall. The family spoke only when they had to. They were gathering the strength for the days that would follow. The funeral began the next day at the temple. Villagers arrived in plain clothes and took quiet seats under the shade. A row of monks from the nearby distance led the chant, and a small photo of Tao stood on a table with flowers and incense beside it. The mother sat in front of Manao and the younger sisters. The uncle stayed close to handle small tasks so they did not have to move. People came forward one by one to offer condolences. They spoke in short sentences and stepped back. No one tried to tell a story. They understood that silence would carry more care than words. During the chanting, Manao kept her hand on the edge of the coffin. She did not cry loudly. She stood still and watched the photo as if she was keeping guard. In the weeks after the funeral, the village decided to build a small shrine for Tao. They chose the corner where the lane meets the main road, the place where many had heard the crying pause each night. A carpenter donated a small, simple wooden spirit house. Neighbors brought white paints and fresh marigold flower and a small glass for incense sticks. In the morning, they raised the shrine and family gathered without a formal announcement. The uncle set the base straight. The mother placed Dao's photo inside with a clear frame and set it beneath the roof. Manao arranged flowers and a candle in the metal cup. No speeches were made. People just stood there together in a quiet half circle and bowed their heads at the shrine. By evening, a path had formed in the dust from many careful steps. Young women on their way home stopped to bow at the shrine. Mothers brought their daughters and showed them how to place incense and step back with both hands together. The shrine made the corner feel watched over. The road felt safer, not because of the danger was gone, but because the village had agreed to remember. For context, the reason why the villagers decided to set the shrine up, maybe it was because they want to have a place to pay respect to Tao and ask her for protection over their daughters or sons who is making their way home in the dark at night. And on the other hand, the official case never found a clear end. There were no news name and there were no final reports that tied every piece together. But even so, the village held on to what it knew. The nights of crying had stopped after the 7th night and the sack at the station had appeared at dawn. Tao had been found in the same kuti that the monk had stepped out on the night of the first night. There were fixed points and they did not change. What remained was a way of living. Families kept small lamps by their doors. Girls walked home together after dark, and people gave the road its quiet at night. When people passed by the shrine, they slowed their steps. Some offered flowers, while some only offered a small bowl. It was enough to pay respect. The story did not end with answers. It ended with a village that remembered, and a corner that stayed bright, and a family that learned to stand again. Thank you for staying with this story. If it reaches you, let it be a reminder to walk each other home, and to listen when the road goes quiet, and to keep a light where it matters. I would also like to give credit to the original story on the Ghost Radio, which is a Thai ghost radio where people can call in and tell the stories and share it with everyone about ghost encounters, curses, and all things creepy. So that is it for now. Thank you for listening, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you.